Good morning. The text has been read, and I invite you to think with me from the theme that we have continued to reflect upon throughout the year, which is faith for a fractured world. Now, to all of the students in my preaching class, I want you to take note and listen to this, your homiletical claim. Amen. So before we start, I want you to hear this claim, which is that God does not discard what is fractured. God reworks it, revealing that even in collapse, there remains the possibility of sacred recreation. Friends, there is a sound in the world right now. It is not harmony, it is fracture. It is the sound of bombs splitting open landscapes across nations. It is the sound of oceans rising and forests burning. It is the sound of policies being signed that strip people of dignity, labor, healthcare, and home. It is the quiet but no less violent sound of anxiety sitting in the chest of everyday people trying to figure out how to pay rent, how to get gas, how to keep the lights on, how to survive systems that were never designed for their flourishing. And if we're honest, it is also the sound of our own hearts cracking under the weight of grief. Because while the world is unraveling on a global scale, somebody you know is also battling illness. Somebody is watching a loved one slip away. Somebody is asking the ancient question in a modern key, where are you, God, in the midst of this? So God does something curious in Jeremiah 18. God does not send Jeremiah to the temple. God does not send Jeremiah to the palace. God sends Jeremiah to a workshop, to the potter's house. God says, go down there and I will let you hear my word. And when Jeremiah arrives, he does not hear a sermon. He sees a process, a potter at the wheel, hands moving, pressure applied, and then something goes wrong. The vessel is marred, not discarded, but marred in the hands of the potter. And here is where the text refuses despair. The potter does not throw the clay away. The potter does not curse the clay for failing to hold its shape, but the potter simply reworks it. The potter reshapes it. The potter reimagines it as it seemed good to the potter to do. And God says, can I not do with you what this potter has done? Let me slow this down right here because this is where we have been mistaught and I need us to see it clearly. Too often, this text has been used to preach control, as if we are nothing more than passive clay, and God is some distant artisan imposing divine will without resistance, without relationship. But that is not what Jeremiah sees, and that is not who we are. We are the clay. Yes, but not in the sense of being born defective, not in the tired theological imagination that tells us that we arrived here already wrong. No, 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 no. We are the clay that has been handled. We are the clay that has been shaped in systems, clay that has been formed in histories, clay that has been pressed by policies, economies, and ideologies. Society is clay. Institutions are clay. Our classrooms are full of clay. Students carrying the imprint of everything that has touched their lives before they ever walked through the door. And what Jeremiah sees is not inherently bad clay. He sees clay that has become marred in the hands of a potter. So we have to ask this, what does it mean to be marred? Because the people Jeremiah is sent to, they were not broken because they were born that way. They were marred because of what they had come to participate in and what they had come to normalize. They had aligned themselves with predictable power. They trusted empire more than they trusted God. They built systems that benefited a few while crushing many. They practiced religion without justice. They worshiped but without integrity. They became comfortable in arrangements that distorted their humanity and the humanity of others. And at the same time, they were also a people who had been shaped by conquest, by threat, by survival. A people navigating pressure from surrounding empires. A people who knew what it meant to be acted upon, even as they acted in harmful ways themselves. So their marredness was not about this original defect. The marredness was about distortion through proximity to power. And if we're honest again, this is still our condition. We are clay that has been pressed, yes, by racism and capitalism and patriarchy and ableism. Clay that has learned to survive. Clay that sometimes resists justice. Clay that collapses sometimes under the weight of it all. And again, this is what Jeremiah sees. The clay doesn't hold its shape. It resists. It buckles. It becomes something other than what it was meant to be. And yet the potter says, not to dominate, not to discard, but to rework. This is not about control, friends. This is about relationship. A God who refuses to abandon us to the distortions we have inherited or participate in. A God who keeps working with us individually and collectively, even when we have been shaped by systems that deform us. So no, we ain't passive. We are responsive clay. We are communal clay and historical clay. And the good news is that being marred is not the end of the story. Now, I know for some of us, potter's hands, again, might feel distant. They might feel abstract. They might even feel hard to picture. But I've seen those hands before, not in a workshop, but at a table, in a living room, with fabric draped across her lap. My own grandmother, she was a seamstress. And I just don't mean that she knew how to sew. I mean, she had a way of seeing what wasn't obvious, seeing what other people had already dismissed, seeing what the world had labeled unusable, and refusing to agree. She could take scraps, pieces that didn't match, edges that were frayed, cloth that had already been worn thin, and then she would sit with it. She wouldn't rush it. She wouldn't resent it. She would turn it over in her hands as if she believed there was still something in it worth bringing forward. And I realize now, friends, that it wasn't just skill, that was faith. It was faith to see what had not yet been seen. It was faith to imagine beyond what was in front of her. It was faith to believe that fracture does not cancel possibility. With patience, with vision, with a kind of quiet, steady authority, Brittany, she would begin to work. As she would put the needle in her hand, she would begin to thread it. And what didn't fit, she would adjust it. When what was torn, she would reinforce it. I wish I had some seamstresses in here. What seemed unusable, she would reimagine. And what came out on the other side was just not repaired. It was restored. It was given a new narrative. It was given a new purpose. It was given a new life, Misha, sometimes even more beautiful than what it had been before. And maybe that's what faith looks like in a fractured world. Not denial, not pretending, Manye, that the tear isn't there, but the courage to look at what has been broken in us, what has been broken around us, what has been broken within our institutions, within our communities, and within our very society, and still be able to say, there is more than what has been done to it. There is more than what has become under pressure. And when I read Jeremiah now, the clay in the potter's hands is not so distant to me. Because what I saw in my grandmother's hands was the same refusal to discard, the same commitment to say, the same insistence, and what appears marred is not yet beyond reworking. So again, I say, we are not passive clay. We are clay, yes, that has been handled, but we are still in the hands of a potter. In the hands of a potter who sees beyond what is. And there remains the possibility of being reworked, of being reimagined, and being restored to see what had not yet been seen. Because in the hands of a committed potter, even clay that has been distorted by power can be reshaped into something just, into something whole, and into something new. And if we needed another image, just in case this grandmother image is not sitting well with you, we can travel from the potter's house to the art of kintsugai. Kintsugai is a Japanese practice of repairing broken pottery with gold. Not hiding the cracks, not pretending the break never happened, but filling the fracture with something precious so that the vessel becomes more valuable because of its brokenness. The break is not erased in kintsugai. The break, however, is illuminated. I wish I was at my home church today. That there are gold in the cracks. Now sit with that for a moment, because we are living in a kintsugai moment. A fractured democracy, cracked institutions, broken trust, bodies under pressure, communities stretched thin, and the temptation is either to deny the cracks or to despair because of them. But Jeremiah says, go to the potter's house. And Kintsugai whispers, look again at the break. Because what if the fracture is not the end of the story? What if God is asking us to be not to be unbroken, but to be reworked? But here's the tension. The tension in the text that we must not ignore. God says in verse 7, if at any time I declare that a nation will be uprooted, torn down, destroyed, that sounds like judgment, and it is. But it is not fixed, because what follows, friends, is the possibility of change. This is a responsive God, which means the future is not sealed. Instead, the future is shaped. And here is where faith comes in. Not the kind of faith that ignores reality. Not this kind of infinitesimal kindergarten faith. Not the Sunday school, God loves all the little children in the world kind of faith. Not the kind of faith that spiritualizes suffering, but a faith that dares to believe that even in systems that are crumbling, we are not powerless clay. We are participants in the reworking. So what does faith look like, friends, in the fractured world? It looks like refusing to be numbed by constant crisis. It looks like telling the truth about what is broken without losing the imagination for what can be made new. It looks like a people showing up for one another in small, sacred ways. A shared meal when resources are scarce. A text that says, hey, I'm still here. A gathering, digital or physical, where truth can be told and held. Faith becomes visible in the ways we refuse isolation, in the ways we build what I know you might call, what I call hush harbors, spaces of refuge, imagination, and collective breath. That is the potter's work. That is the kintsugai work. Hands in clay, gold in cracks. And maybe, just maybe, the question is not simply, where is God in the midst? Maybe, just maybe, the question is not simply, what is God doing? But maybe the question is, will we stay on the wheel? Because the easiest thing to do right now is to walk away. The easiest thing to do right now is to detach, is to harden. It's to do what our brother Marvin said, throw up both your hands and holler. It's to say, this is too broken to fix. But the potter says, and if we are made in the image of the potter, then we too are called to stay, to shape policy with justice, to build community with care, to lend the earth like it matters, to love people like their lives are sacred, to become co-laborers in divine recreation. So I came to tell you this morning, yes, the world is fractured, but fracture is not failure in the hands of God. Fracture is material, and material is for reworking. Material is for resistance. Material is for imagination. And if we dare to believe it, those very cracks we are trying to hide might become the very places where gold shows up. Pause and ponder this. Where have you mistaken fracture for finality? Where is God inviting you not to be perfect, but to be reworked? And what would it look like for you to become gold in someone else's cracks? Because faith in a time like this, friends, is not about pretending that the vessel is whole. It is about trusting that in the hands of a skilled and sacred potter, even now, something new is being formed. You know, there's this old song. This old song in the African American gospel tradition, a song that carried this truth, a song from a people who knew and know what it means to be pressed, to be shaped, to be broken by the world, and yet still believed that God was not finished with them yet. Tremaine and Walter Hawkins gave us this witness in the sound of the Potter's House. In case you